Frank, thanks again for being with us at Agency Analytics to talk about the 7 capabilities framework for agencies. We've discussed a lot so far,
We sure have.
and and why don't we recap all the things that we talked about in a quick nutshell, leading us into today's topic, which is the systematic sales process for agencies and how that all fits with the growth momentum approach that is so crucial for agencies to have to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about systematic sales process today.
Awesome. Where does the systematic sales process fit within the 7 capabilities framework? Now that we just discussed things like True North strategy and other aspects of the framework that you've come up with for agencies.
Yeah, so there's 7 capabilities that we talk about within the growth momentum method, right? So there's True North strategy, exceptional execution. Together, those two, we can kind of look at those grouped together as those are your foundational business skills. Like no matter what business you run, you need to have those capabilities achieved. You need to have those skills in the business. The next would be world-class offerings. So that would kind of be the third of the 7. And after world-class offering, we have systematic sales process. And I'll mention the 5th, which is active lead generation. The reason I'll mention that now, even though we're not going to talk about that today, is because then the grouping of world-class offering, systematic sales process, and active lead generation, that group makes up what I call your revenue engine, right? So if you were to think about it building in layers, your first 2 capabilities, True North strategy and exceptional execution, those are your business skills. Those are what your approach to planning and management and the strategy of the business, and you're going to cascade that across every function of the business. You need those as the foundation. The next thing is you need a revenue engine. And so the revenue engine from an optimization standpoint starts with your world-class offering, which we've already talked about, and we've talked about the reasons why. So then the next thing, assuming you have your world-class offering dialed in, is the systematic sales process. Because now that we have an offering that, makes clients happy and it keeps clients and it's profitable and all of those things, now we can put a process in place to prove that we can sell it to more than just a couple of folks.
The question I was going to bring up, because you did say that there are 3 elements in the revenue engine, world-class execution.
World-class offering.
World-class offering.
Yeah.
Except, exceptional execution is in the other part. World-class offering, systematic sales process, and active lead generation.
Correct.
Why doesn't active lead generation come first? Why don't you get the leads, then sell to the leads?
Because the law of systems optimization. The law of systems optimization says that if we're going to optimize a given system's output, if we optimize steps 2 or later in that system, we get more output with the same amount of input. So if we think about the flow of how clients experience your organization, they experience your marketing, which is meant to generate leads. Then they experience your sales team, which is the sales process meant to convert them. And then they experience your offering. So that's the chronological flow. But to optimize, we optimize in reverse. That's how we create the most momentum possible. So that's why if we don't have a world-class offering, then why the heck are we obsessed and concerned about generating the leads and coming up with our lead generation machine? Because then we're sending it into a system that's not optimized, kind of to use the cliche, a leaky bucket, right?
Sure.
So you optimize in that order. Now, that's not to say that if your world-class offering isn't quite there just yet, that you just simply don't attempt to generate leads. But if you're the founder of the business and you have to identify what your single biggest blocker to growth is, you have to be keenly aware that it's your offering. And that's going to need your time and your attention. You're going to work closely with the leader of that area to make sure that you get that offering to a place where you can call it world-class. Then you move to the sales process. Okay. So if you're the founder, this tells you where your biggest blocker to growth is. But again, the law of systems optimization is that we optimize in reverse, which means we'll get more output with the same amount of input. If we think about what it takes to generate leads, it's hard to generate leads. You spend a lot of time, you spend a lot of money. It's expensive to generate leads. So if we're going to do that, we need to make sure that the subsequent steps are working predictably. Okay.
Yep.
A lot of folks don't realize marketing is to scale things that are already working. Marketing isn't there to fix broken fundamental things. So if your offering isn't world-class, that's a broken fundamental thing. If you have a sales process, which we're going to talk about today, where it doesn't predictably close at a high rate, you continue to land terrible clients, and oh, by the way, the founder's required to close almost every deal, then you don't have a systematic sales process. So now we're sending a bunch of expensive leads into a process that isn't going to convert real well, that the founder can't get out of, only to send them into an offering that also is going to churn them out, right? So that's why the law of systems optimization was we optimize in reverse.
Thank you so much for that clarification. And yes, now that we understand how optimization works for the revenue engine. So we start with a world-class offering. We go into systematic sales process, and then we optimize active lead generation, which we'll talk about next time. Let's really zoom in on the systematic sales process and what that systematic sales process looks like specifically for an agency. How do they want to set this up so that it is set up for success for the long term so they can close as many of those sales as possible?
Yeah, what I want to talk about is we'll talk about 5 attributes that you kind of want to gauge this capability on, right? Because again, we're talking about capabilities. So if you're the founder or you're the head leader of the business, you're trying to bring about these capabilities in your business. So for the capability of systematic sales process, there's some attributes that you're going to rate the systematic sales process against this capability. So we'll talk about those attributes. And then what we can do is, if we have time, we'll talk a little bit about some of the specific steps in the process. Okay. And then the other note that I want to bring up, and just to kind of piggybacks on what we talked about just a few moments ago, is that sales is not lead gen and lead gen is not sales. So today, when we talk about systematic sales process, we're talking about the process of what do you do once you have someone that wants to talk to you? Once you're able to get someone that wants to talk to you, that lead is like, yes, they're raising their hand and proactively saying they want to talk to you, or they're saying yes to your outreach, right? So now you have someone that wants to talk to you. So that's the systematic sales process. Let's talk about the 5 attributes. So attribute number 1 is repeatable. So you want to make your sales process as repeatable as possible. Attribute number 2 is scalable. You want to make sure it's as scalable as possible. We can go into the details of each of these if you'd like. The 3rd attribute is efficient, making sure your sales team is efficient with the leads and prospects that they're taking through the process. The 4th attribute is tracking and measurement, right? That you're tracking and reviewing performance data regularly. And then finally is your handoff from sales to operations, a quality sales handoff. So those are the 5 attributes. And so what I ask your listeners to do, your readers, your listeners to do, is on each of those, just rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5. 5 is like, we have this nailed. It's always true. 1 is this is never true. We don't have it nailed, right? Repeatable, scalable, it's efficient. You're reviewing performance data regularly, and you have a high quality sales operations handoff. So those are the 5 attributes.
Where do you want to be on the scale of 1 to 5? When you say you want to rate your those different aspects, out of 5.
Yeah.
Is 4 out of 5 good enough? Is 3 out of 5 good enough? Or do you want to always need to be like, okay, we're 5 out of 5 on top of this, and maybe we can break it down one item at a time if that helps.
When I have my clients rate their attributes in each of these 7 capability areas, there's numerous attributes per capability area. In some areas there's 10, in some areas there's 14 attributes. And so what I tell them is the average across those attributes in that area, you want to be 4.0 plus. Okay. Right? You want to be 4.0 plus. So you kind of want to look at these as statements, and you're going to rate the statement as being true or not true. Okay. So the statement is, our sales process is as repeatable as possible. So for your organization, how true is that statement? 5 is it's always true. 1 is it's never true.
Okay.
Okay. And so the second statement, Our sales process is as scalable as possible. How true is that statement? The third statement, our sales team is efficient. Okay. The fourth statement, we track and review performance data regularly. Okay. And then the fifth statement, we have a high quality sales operations handoff.
Perfect.
Okay. So then how true are those statements?
Okay. And to determine if these statements are true or not, let's break it down. Repeatability. When we talk about repeatability for a sales process, are we talking about templating a sales script? Are we talking about software or the way we connect with a lead? What does repeatable mean for you, Frank?
Yeah, repeatable means that we have a process that is the same every single time. So that's from the moment that we set the appointment all the way through signing the contract. Generally speaking, I talk about 5 stages of the sales process being evaluation, discovery, planning, presentation, and contracting, right? Those are the 5 major stages that you take people through. Each of those stages need to have the steps documented. The requirements of each stage need to be documented, and they need to be followed by everybody, right? And so what you want to do is once you have those documented and standardized, you want to standardize the documents and assets that are used in that process, and you want to operationalize that process, meaning you want to use whatever tech you have and to the maximum degree possible to make sure it's hard to not follow the process, right? That's what tech and automation is for. It's to make it difficult to not follow the process. It's not to, completely outsource the physical work of whatever it is. And in some cases, you can do some of that. But the most important aspect is we increase the odds that we're going to follow the process precisely every single time. Okay. So that's the repeatable part.
Perfect. In terms of scalability, so you've got these SOPs into place, you've got your automations into place, your process is repeatable. What makes it scalable?
Yeah. Scalable are the things you do to ensure that people other than the founder can execute that process.
Right. So you've talked about the superhero aspect of the founder position in the past. And I think in this context, that word also applies, because the founder at the beginning, let's say you've got a startup agency, the founder does most of the work. That person is responsible for contacting those initial leads and making those first sales, building that process. So you don't want that process to always rely on one single person. You want that to be, well, I don't want to say repeatable because that's the word from before, but you want it to be adopted by other members of the sales team the same way a founder would have approached it.
Yeah.
Right?
So when we say scalable, it's about making sure that the content within that process and the product being sold in that process doesn't require a superhero like the founder. Okay. Because So let's say if what you're selling has a standardized process, but the product is so complex and there's so much creativity, quote unquote, that you need the founder to close the deal. Well, then it's not very scalable. Does that make sense? Right. You might have a process you can follow the same way every time, but not very scalable because it requires the founder to be the superhero. So that's one aspect. And then it's the things that you implement on an ongoing basis to make sure that folks are ready to go, ready to execute that process. So it's the training, it's the testing, it's the role playing, it's the shadowing, it's the mentoring. You have protocols in place to make sure that your people are ready to go. They can execute that process, no problem. And they don't have to pull in the founder to get a deal closed.
Yeah. And that ties directly into, the other point which you mentioned, which is to increase that sales team efficiency. If it's scalable, the efficiency comes naturally, or it should, unless there are more elements that you need to add to the efficient model.
Yeah, the efficiency is about your close rate, right?
Okay.
I mean, your close rate is a direct measurement on the efficiency of the people you're putting into that process. Okay. So if you put 100 people in, 100 prospects in, or let's say opportunities, you put 100 opportunities in and, 30 come out, that's not very efficient. If 60 come out, that's not bad. Okay. So what that means is that you have to make sure you have a criteria list for what makes for a good client, and then incorporate that into your very first meeting, which we call the evaluation step. Okay. And then you also want to make sure that you establish a culture that you never advance prospects to opportunities unless they meet that criteria. That is far and away one of the absolute biggest things you can do to make sure that the process is efficient, that
So
you're
you
ultimately
want,
going to close at a high rate.
yeah. So you want a client that's the right fit for your agency, for example, if we're talking about agencies. You want to be able to move that lead into the process that's repeatable, and to have that efficiency, meaning the close, happen regularly at the highest rate possible. And then you want to review and track your performance data and say, okay, this system's working. Our close rate is high. What are other efficiencies that we can implement based on the data that we're collecting? So there's different processes, different tools that sales team use to track their sales and track their performance. Maybe you can expand on that a little bit and tell us exactly, how you would review performance data.
Yeah. So the obvious KPI coming out of your sales process, your systematic sales process capability, there's really kind of two. It's contract value and new clients. Okay, so those are the two KPIs. Those are the required outcomes. So the person who owns systematic sales process is going to have a target for contract value and number of new clients. Now, if we look at metrics that can support that are indicators as to where you might be going wrong if you don't hit those KPIs, you can look at things like average value per contract value from new clients versus contract value from existing clients. You can look at your overall closed won rate. You can look at how many new deals you're adding on a monthly basis, how many evaluation calls you held on a monthly basis, how many were scheduled, how many outreach attempts you've made, what your pipeline value is by stage, and so on. Lots of different things that you could be measuring, but you need to look at those things consistently. That's not to say that if you have a salesperson who hit their KPIs, but they didn't have a high closed won rate. It doesn't mean that they also have to hit that. Remember, the KPIs are the required outcomes. That's what you need to hold people accountable to. The metrics, which are all the things we just talked about, those are your tools. Those are your indicators to help you figure out, why is the KPI off track? Why aren't we hitting the KPI? They're tools to investigate. Hopefully you're going to have leading metrics so you can be ahead of it, but you also want some lagging metrics in there as well, because you need to be able to do some evaluation on both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah. Yeah. Who's in charge of the systematic sales process? Because you hinted at that. Who's going to lead that review process and make sure that everything is optimized properly before we talk about the handoff?
Yeah. Depending on the size of the firm, in an ideal firm, you have someone that owns this capability. And so they might have a number of different titles. They might have VP of sales. It's your head of sales, right? Whoever heads up that team, that your sales department, your sales function, it's that person. VP of sales is a common title for that role. But in smaller firms, what you'll find is, of those 7 capabilities, you won't have an individual leader for each one. And so you might have the founder. The founder might own, capabilities 1 and 2, and they might own capabilities of systematic sales process and active lead generation. They might own those 4 because it's just a small firm and there's, 3 executives total to split up those 7 capabilities. And so that's very common. Ultimately, what you want to work towards is if you're a founder listening to this, you want to replace yourself in each of those capabilities systematically over time, because then you're becoming less and less important to the business, which is what turns a business into a real business and not just a founder's toy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, right. And we've talked about that issue, or that problem. We'll call it the problem that some founders have in the other topics that we discussed in the seven capabilities framework, especially when it comes to like the true north strategy and exceptional execution. Is that kind of making sure that you put yourself at the top, but that you layer your organization with people that can replace you in executing properly those tasks that you've defined as being crucial, that they might actually, that the people that you're putting in place might actually be better at doing than you are.
Well, let's hope they are better, because if we're hiring people into those roles that aren't better than us, then we're setting ourselves up to still be the king. We're setting ourselves up to still be important to the business. And I would suggest that the more important, your level of importance to the business is inversely related to the value of your firm. Right. So if you ever want to sell your firm and you're important to the business, you're going to get a lower valuation. Not because that the buying entity is going to say that, but because that's just how it's going to prove out. And so ultimately, what agency founders and founders of any company needs to do, what they need to do is remain in, columns 1 and 2, capabilities 1 and 2, true north and exceptional execution, for a long time, I think. But all of the other ones, they should be methodically trying to find the person better than them at owning that capability. Now, it doesn't mean that for the systematic sales process capability, we need to go find ourselves a better salesperson than us. We need to go find a better sales leader than us. That's what we're saying. So active lead generation, you don't need to go find someone who's a better marketer than you. You need to go find someone who's a better marketing leader than you.
Right.
That's what we're saying. So eventually, whoever owns systematic sales process, they need to be the best sales leader you can find to join your team, not just the best salesperson.
Yeah, fantastic. I think that clarifies things really well, which brings us to the handoff. So the last step in optimizing your systematic sales process is, the handoff to the rest of the organization.
Yeah, so we need to make sure that we start new client relationships on the right foot, and we're going to implement a quality sales operations handoff to make that happen. It's an internal handoff that should be standardized so that it happens within a specific number of days after closing the deal. And that handoff should include the salesperson, the main point of contact on your side, and any relevant production/execution team members. And so what you're going to do during that meeting is the salesperson should deliver and review the background on the client, notes from the sales process, important client nuances, the presentation deck that the client saw when, they agreed to do the deal, and any contracted scope of services. So that should be a 15, 20-minute meeting that you have internally to make sure that the person that's going to own the working relationship on your side has all the debriefing, the right information from the salesperson that closed the deal. And that should be standardized. That should happen in an automated fashion. Again, so when we talk about operationalizing things, I mentioned that a moment ago. When you close a deal in your CRM, the task to schedule this should automatically come up. The agenda, copy and paste it in there so it's there. So that way it happens every time within a certain number of days, and you have the same agenda every single time.
And that handoff will go to what? Like a customer success team member, an account manager? Like who usually will take over from the sales team?
Yeah. So the salesperson, it's their responsibility to schedule it and make it happen, because they're going to bring all the information and inform the team. The person from your world-class offering, from your operations side, should be whoever is going to be the main point of contact for the client. So in your agency, you might call that an account manager, you might call it account strategist, you might call it a project manager, whoever that main point of contact is going to be for the client on your side. And then if there are any relevant production/execution team members, that should be in on that just because they need to hear about some important nuances, then have those people involved as well. But at minimum, salesperson, and then the main point of contact in your services team who's going to own that client. So again, whether that's account manager, account strategist, account director, project manager, maybe you just have a single service with none of those people involved, and it's just the PPC strategist, or it's just the content strategist, or whoever that main person is for the client. If the salesperson, that person at minimum need that handoff to make sure that they're on the same page.
Right. You need that bridge. Can you give me an example of a client that you've worked with recently where they had to optimize their sales process and what that looked like? Maybe one of the issues they were experiencing and how they solved that issue. Maybe draw us a little bit of a portrait if you have one in your back pocket.
Yeah, I have a client who did not have a repeatable process. I mean, they kind of loosely had a process, but it was because he was the rock star and he was the hero. But once he implemented those 5 stages that I talked about, evaluation, discovery, planning, presentation, contracting, all of a sudden he started to close at a much higher rate. But more importantly, what happened is because he did the evaluation step right, which means he was no longer putting people into the remaining steps, the following steps, unless they were a perfect fit, unless they were a great fit. He was able to actually spend his time working with the best prospects, and he was closing deals at 2x his previous price points. Right. And so, as a result, they were, 7 months into the year, 150% compared to the previous year's sales volume. Right. And only 7 months into the year, because he started following this process. He started getting really specific about his value proposition and making sure that if he's going to put someone in as an opportunity, that they absolutely met the evaluation criteria. So he's closing at a higher rate. And in some cases, he was doubling his prices and closing those.
That's amazing. And I mean, that just shows that with the proper system in place, your sales can actually improve. And even if your prices are higher, if you have the process in place and you can close those deals, you're set up to grow your agency, grow your business at a repeatable clip, because that's what we want to do with that growth momentum growth momentum method is to implement that repeatable process to make sure that growth is sustainable.
Absolutely. I think about, in my personal story, I'll never forget the day that we landed a client and they said, "Oh yeah, we got this client starting." And I was like, "Who?" I had no idea. And so that was really great that we were landing business with people I had never met. I wasn't involved in the process. I had another client do this recently and he said, "Amazing." They landed a client, brought a client, and he hadn't even met them or heard about them, and just found out from their regular cadences of planning and management and their accountability cadences. Yeah, new client starting. It's like, amazing. So that's the other thing is when this is working and you have a systematic sales process, you can bring clients into the business that you've never met, that you weren't instrumental in closing the deal if you're a founder, and you finally have something that's working without you.
Yeah. And that's the goal. Just make your business grow without you and be on your way to eventually be able to focus on bigger things, better things, do more strategy, be less hands into the business, let your team handle the processes. You posted something on LinkedIn recently, and I thought it was a really good quote about the systematic sales process. I think you said it's about creating meaningful connections with prospects and understanding their unique needs. We believe in the power of collaboration and strategic planning to ensure mutual success. Mutual success, I think, is the key term here. By building your sales team, empowering your sales team, everybody is set up for success. You want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, it's from both sides. It's not only how you're going to manage your sales team and your firm, and having that mutual success, right? You want people to have the incentives that align with the success of the firm, right? So that's mutual. But then with your clients, if you're not clear in the transformation you bring to clients, and you're obsessed about that specific transformation, then you're going to end up doing business with a lot of different types of clients who have a lot of different types of problems. And it'll be very difficult for you and your team to be obsessed about a specific kind of transformation. But when you have a specific kind of transformation, and this gets back to the true north stuff, right? That your business strategy is really sharp and specific. But when you have that, that allows you to go establish mutual interests with your prospective clients, because the people that resonate with that, well, by the way, that's what we're really good at. And that's what we're obsessed about. That's what we're passionate about. And now you're creating a relationship right from the get-go where you have mutual shared interests. So it's on both sides, right? It's with your clients, it's with your team. And that's what you're looking for. It's not to do that in a way that's like warm and fuzzy and fake. It's quite literally to set up the structure of your strategy and the structure of your incentives with your team such that it's aligned. You're incentivized to move in the same direction. And that's not about lip service. It's not about warmth, but it's quite literally, you both are incentivized to move in the same direction.
Yeah. It's understanding that your success as an agency, as a firm, as a company hinges on their success, and that the benefits are mutual, building that relationship based on the same needs and values to a certain extent. But that's, again, true north, aligning the true north, aligning all the different elements that fall under that.
And that's why it's so important to have a true north. If you don't have a true north, it's much harder to do these things. I mean, you think about the kind of people you need to bring into your firm. I mean, it goes back to true north. If you don't have a true north, you're going to be bringing all sorts of people onto your team, and you may not have shared values. Well, you might have someone on your team who's a nice human, but if they don't have shared values and shared interests, it's not going to work. They're actually going to detract from where you could be going. So it's really important that you filter who's on your team against those values. And today we're talking about sales process. You filter who comes into your company as a client based on that ideal client criteria. Now, that's not to say that you're so stringent with that you're turning away 90% of the people you talk to. But if you're not turning away a decent amount, you're probably taking on too many bad fit clients.
Yeah. And that's what it comes down to. Get the right clients, make them fit the sales offering, and then close the sale.
Man, when you pair the right clients with the right solution delivered by the right team, your business is unstoppable.
I think that's a perfect way to close. Frank, thanks for your time today. Always appreciate talking to you. Always such fantastic insights. If there's anything else you want to add, open mic for you at this point.
Well, Francois, thanks for having me. I enjoy these conversations and letting the Agency Analytics audience know about this process, this framework. These 7 capabilities really are the 7 capabilities that you need to obsess about if you're going to elevate yourself from being a working founder to a successful entrepreneur. This is the lens through which you must look at your business. Does your business have these 7 capabilities? If not, you methodically go to work and implement one at a time. Now, it will take you time, but when you do it once and then you pass through to optimize, it goes a little bit faster. And when you pass through to optimize again, so each time you go through and optimize, it all happens faster and faster. And then if you were to build a 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th firm, it goes even faster still, because you already know the process. You're already looking at a business through this lens, and you can evaluate real quick which area is the biggest blocker to growth, and you can go to work smashing it.